Okay, we should be ready to go.
Thank you so much, Summer, and thank you everyone for coming together tonight. It is September 22nd, 7:03 p.m. And consistent with the provisions of the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act and our Governor Gary Herbert, we are meeting online here tonight. I'll call this meeting to order, and Summer, please take us through a roll call vote.
Okay, we have Kaylin Jones, Moab City Council, Mayor Emily Niehaus, Carly Castle, Assistant City Manager, Joel Linares, City Manager, Karen Guzman Newton, Moab City Council, Lori Simonson, City Attorney, Mike Duncan, Moab City Council, Ronnie Duressery, Moab City Council, and Tony Newsom Boyd, Moab City Council.
It's so good to see everyone. Okay, so tonight is a very specific meeting. We have decided to have a public meeting in lieu of a regular city council meeting so that we can have our ears open to what the community thinks about Proposition 8. Proposition 8, Recreation, Arts, and Parks Tax, also known as the RAP tax. We are here for public comments. This time is allotted to the general public for comments for and or against the RAP tax question that will be on the upcoming ballot, also known as Proposition 8. So to begin, how to join the electronic meeting with Zoom. You can join the meeting using a link that was published via our agenda and a meeting ID and passcode if needed. And we're asking that when people join the meeting, they'll be placed in a waiting room and they'll be added to the meeting by the moderator. So once you're added to the meeting, please state your name for the record. If folks want to participate by phone, that also is an option. And again, we've published that phone number on our agenda, including the meeting ID and passcode for that as well. And again, once you're added to the meeting, then please state your name for the record, full name. Finally, the third way for the public to be heard tonight is by submitting written comments, of which, Summer, correct me if I'm wrong, I just went and I counted that there are 9 comments that have been made, one of which was submitted twice by the same person.
Correct.
Is that that you have?
Mm-hmm.
So Council, I wanted to ask you, and maybe, we'll get to that part of the agenda, if you preferred us to reference that or if you wanted me to read each comment into the record online for us. So be thinking about how you want to answer that question. We don't have to answer it right now. That is what we're here to do. Again, this is a public meeting specifically for us to receive comments and questions about Proposition 8, the RAP tax. We have prepared, and by we I mean Joel, has prepared a PowerPoint presentation so that we are very clear on what is being proposed with Prop 8. Once he concludes with that presentation, we'll follow up with comments from Lori on the state statute, and then I will read the letter that we all penned and signed in favor of Proposition 8. So Joel, you're up first. Take it away.
All right, well, thanks everyone. I want to thank Lisa for the presentation, and we'll begin. All right, it doesn't show me what it shows you, so does that look okay? All right, so Proposition 8 is going to be on the ballot this November 3rd for the voters in the city to decide whether or not we should pass a tax on sales that will support arts, parks, and recreation. That tax would be 0.1%, a tenth of a percent, and would be on all sales within the city, not including unprepared food items and gasoline. Those are exempt from the tax. This tax that is collected would be collected at Moab stores, those who are attending events or staying at overnight lodging or eating at restaurants. And it will be primarily generated through tourism, which will make up about 75 to 80% of the tax that is collected. The RAP tax is very limited in how we can use it by the state code. We can use it for parks, playing fields, courts, pickleballs, the MARC, the MRAC, pedestrian trails, bike paths, sporting programs and activities, arts and culture, and qualifying non-for-profit groups. That spending is very regulated. We at the city, any municipal government is audited annually by municipal auditors, and those findings are turned over to the state. And so any money we raise through Proposition 8 would be governed under those rules and would be highly regulated to make sure we're only spending that money for those types of activities. Okay. We, for many years, have subsidized these programs, the MARC, the MRAC, and recreation, sometimes to the tune of almost $1 million a year. And the subsidies are no longer sustainable at these levels. And so we've started to try and find a different revenue source to try and help pay for them. This Proposition 8 would help offset the portion of the subsidy, enabling the city to continue to provide these valuable programs for local youth and adults. And it also is a way for visitors to pay towards amenities that primarily benefit the local residents. Based on our numbers and what we could calculate from 2009, if this Proposition 8 is adopted, it would have generated approximately $300,000 in revenue in 2019. And I want to reiterate that 75 to 80% of those sales would come from visitors to the community, and that it is, again, not collected on unprepared food or gasoline. So why a rat tax instead of, say, a property tax? If the city instituted a property tax, then $1 for every $1 that is raised would be paid for locals, where that 75 to 80% that would be coming from visitors, it would only be 25 cents for every dollar we raise would be coming for locals to support programming and facilities that are primarily used by locals. So it's a good deal in that way for collection. Again, based on what we've said, it would raise approximately $300,000 to $400,000. It would be a penny for every $10 spent. It is one way for visitors to help pay for amenities that primarily benefit Moab residents, including sports programming, MRAC operations, arts events, programs at the parks and facilities. We create more sustainable revenue stream for our arts and recreation services and help to stabilize these current operations over time. This is the last available tourist tax that we're not collecting. The city has implemented all the other tourist tax options that are available to it, and it has not historically done this one. This one, if adopted, would be in effect for a period of 10 years. At the end of that 10-year period, it would have to go on the ballot again for reconsideration by voters to be readopted. So Moab residents would have the opportunity to weigh in how these funds are distributed. Potential amenities and programs will be suggested during each budget year, and that information be available to the community so that residents can make their views known during a public meeting. Some communities have created a committee that considers qualified recreation, art, parks, projects, and programs, including those managed by community non-for-profit groups. If the city council so chose to create such a group, the community would review applications and make recommendations to the Moab City Council, and the council will consider community feedback when making that final decision. There was a budget shortfall coming into 2020, and that was before the pandemic arrived. The city has taken its steps that it can take to tighten its belt and to live within its means, and is now taking the necessary steps to try and secure more revenue through Proposition 8. When voters go to the poll, they will see the language on the ballot reads, shall the city of Moab, Utah be authorized to impose a 0.1% sales and use tax to fund cultural facilities, recreational facilities, and zoological facilities, and botanical gardens or organizations, cultural organizations, and zoological organizations in the city. I realize that Moab doesn't have some of those features and doesn't offer some of those amenities, but that is the statutory language that this money would qualify for. And so we included all of it in order to be in compliance with the code and to make sure that people knew those are the uses that are allowed. And so who knows what the future holds. If 8 years from now, the city did have a zoological facility, then that money could go towards that facility as well. But we recognize that currently we do not, but we wanted to include the statutory language just to make sure there was no confusion as to what the money could be used for to be compliant with the code. And then also if it was adopted and down the road, if we did have those facilities, we would be eligible to use the money for those types of activities as well. I really want to thank Lisa and Carly, McKenna, Sasha, Liz, and Summer for all the work they put into this. We started this process back in November, and it has taken us basically a year by the time it's voted on by voters to check all the boxes and make sure we're compliant with the code and make sure that we're doing everything properly. So it's been a lot of work, and whether it's approved or not approved by the voters, the staff has done an excellent job making sure we're compliant. We've ran several ads in the local papers letting people know when the arguments for and against were deadlined for the polling and for the information packets. And we also will be running several ads leading up to the election, reminding people to vote on November 3rd, regardless of how they choose to vote on this proposition. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions for me.
I have a quick one, Joel.
Yeah.
Is this tax just on businesses that are within Moab city limits, or does it extend to the county?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the very first steps we had to do back in January was we had to send a letter of notice to the county council and let them know that we were intending to do this process. They had the opportunity to then put it on the ballot for a county-wide tax for this type of use. They, through a resolution they adopted, declined that opportunity and then sent it back to the city. So at this point, it would only be collected within the city boundaries, and the revenue would come directly to the city for distribution and use.
Ronnie, did you have a question?
Oh, I mean, I might have some questions, but I feel like I know this time is supposed to be for the public, so I'm happy hearing that. I just had a process question for you and Joel. So when we hear from the public, if they have questions that staff or council can immediately elucidate or respond to, how will this meeting function at the end? Can we do that if we feel like there's information we can clarify?
Absolutely. There is a question and answer section on the city's webpage. There's a webpage for this as well where people can find information. But this is a public meeting, and any questions the council chooses to clarify or interact with those who are providing comment, you're welcome to do so.
Okay, I'll save any of my questions for the end.
Okay, and I'll make sure, Ronnie, to make space for that at the end of our meeting before we adjourn. Okay, any other questions? All right, moving on. Laurie?
Great, thank you, Mayor. I just was going to point out, we are holding this public meeting under Utah Code annotated 59-1-1605, and which requires the governing body, which is the City Council, to allow equal time within a reasonable time limit for a presentation of arguments. So it is equal time for a for argument and equal time for an against argument. I'd just like to point out, as Joel said, we did reach out to the public, and the public had within a certain period of time to provide written arguments for or against the opinion question, and according to the chief election official, we did not receive any. So there's another opportunity to present oral for or against this evening. And then, as everyone has pointed out, there is an equal opportunity for members of the public to just comment or raise questions about the opinion question. And again, the statute just requires equal time within a reasonable time limit. And I'm happy to answer any other questions or anything about the statute or provisions governing RAP tax.
I think that's great. Laurie, thanks for stating that. And while there wasn't a submitted argument against, we as a city council did pen and submit an argument in favor of this, in favor of Proposition 8. Council, I have the letter here that we penned and submitted. Just by show of thumbs, would you like me to read it so that it's here for our meeting, or do we feel confident that it's available for others? Would you like me to read it? Thumbs up or not? So I've got 2 in favor, 1 against. Mike and Karen, let me know. Shall I read it or not?
It probably wouldn't hurt if it doesn't take too long, Emily. I don't see how you can go wrong.
All right. And Karen is just going to ride the wave then, aren't you? You are. You love hearing me read things. So, okay, I'll be expedient but effective. Proposition 8, voter information pamphlet language. Parks, recreation, and arts are valued and cherished aspects of the daily lives of Moab citizens. Each provides opportunities for children, individuals, families, and seniors to build relationships and community, as well as spur creativity, health, and well-being. The city of Moab has a long history of creating open space parks, developing youth and adult sports programming, and providing arts and recreation facilities for the benefit of our valley's residents, as well as for our visitors. To maintain these programs, as well as to add new possibilities for local residents, the Moab City Council voted unanimously to place Proposition 8 on the November 3rd ballot, which will create a funding mechanism needed for our programs and activities in Moab. This is called the Recreation, Arts, and Parks Tax. This would only increase our sales tax rate by 0.1%, which amounts to 1 penny for every $10 spent downtown at a local shop, a restaurant, or for an overnight accommodation. Unprepared food and gasoline are exempt from this tax. Prop 8 could raise between $300,000 and $400,000 in funds each year for our parks, recreation, and arts, and the vast majority would be raised from visitor purchases, as our visitors enjoy many of our amenities. Why is the City Council looking at this tax now? For many years, the city's programs and facilities, including the Moab Recreation and Aquatic Center, youth sports, and the Moab Arts and Recreation Center, have been heavily subsidized by the general fund, totaling almost $1 million annually. Prop 8 would offset this subsidy for 10 years and would only be renewed with voter approval. What Prop 8 isn't. Prop 8 is not a property tax. As a reminder, Moab City is one of the only cities in our state that does not levy a property tax. The property tax you pay goes directly to Grand County and is not shared with Moab City. Residents of the city of Moab will have the opportunity to give feedback and input on how these funds are distributed. Every spring, the City Council goes through a budget process. Residents have the opportunity to provide the City Council with feedback, and the City Council, we will make the final decision on Prop 8 spending. This fund will be ours to spend based on our community's needs and priorities for our parks, recreation, and arts. Prop 8 will be on your November ballot. We encourage everyone to stay engaged and vote on election day. And that was the letter that we submitted as a council to the voter information pamphlet in favor of. Let's see. Now we have gone through all of that. Summer, I would like now to open up to comments and questions from the public. So whomever we have in our waiting room and in whatever order, please welcome our community members to our meeting.
Okay, we should have the first person joining us.
Thank you, Summer. Please state your name.
Looks like they may be connecting to audio.
Community members to our meeting.
Okay, we should have the first person joining us.
Thank you, Summer. Please state your name.
Is it me?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, nobody's asked me or given me any direction, so I did not realize that. This is Sarah Melnikoff, and I'm very sad to say I strongly oppose this tax, and the reason being, I have lost all faith completely in this council's ability to properly spend money based on the heart-wrenching and horrific desecration of the parkway against the will of many in the community and without the input of many in the community and with an ulterior plan. So I don't feel like there's a lot of reason to trust the process, that the funds won't be used to turn the entire parkway into a thrill area, then it won't do more damage to the natural areas. And so for that reason, I'm opposed to it, even though I've been getting calls from people asking me to reconsider. I remain opposed until there's some way of being assured that these funds are not going to be used to create more horrific damage to the natural lands of the parkway. And on that note, I just passed my 16th year of being Friends of the Parkway in partnership with the city. I have yet to have been asked for any input into any processes. I think I was deliberately left out of it. And I've been getting calls from people who got emails from the mayor asking them to be in a focus group. I think with our history of being on every inch of that parkway and doing work with the homeless, with the trails, with all the people that enjoy it, our voice should also be included in those who are giving feedback on it. So that's my thing. I don't know if you guys can even hear me.
We can hear you, Sarah, and thank you for your comments tonight.
You're more than welcome.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. And Summer?
We should have Teresa King joining us here shortly. My side shows she's still connecting to audio.
That's what I see. Hello, Teresa, can you hear me? This is Mayor Niehaus. I see you. I see you, Teresa, but I cannot hear you. Oh, there you are.
This is a super interesting process to try and be a citizen to be heard. Yes, I can hear you. And let's see, how do I hear you?
I see you, Teresa, but I cannot hear you. I can. Ugh.
It's got a little delay.
If you're watching YouTube, you'll want to turn it off.
Am I good now?
You are great. Welcome.
Let me tell you why it's a super interesting process, because you're trying to follow the meeting and figure out when you're supposed to be there and when you're on video or when you're on audio. And so please soon come back. Come back to IRL in real life whenever you feel comfortable. But anyway, I'm here tonight, of course, as many of you know, in support of this particular tax. And I want some people who are listening who may not know that I have been a advocate of this as a private citizen and as an arts advocate for over 15 years. I have known this tax has been available. I have been trying to get somebody's attention to pursue it. I am thrilled that the city council has taken that active stance to do this. It is $1 on $1,000 spent in town. And I'm happy to talk with anybody personally about why I feel this way about this. I am not a pro-tax person. However, I've been so involved with the arts and recreation. And I love, doing stuff in the parks. So I just throw that out there for anybody who's involved. Yes, I've been very involved with this effort, and I have talked to my friend Sarah Melnikoff at length, and will continue to do so. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Teresa, for calling in and for your patience with this process. We'll see you in person soon.
Yay.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us.
The last person I had in the waiting room was Cassie, and she should be joining us. She's joining audio right now.
Thank you so much, Summer. Hi, Cassie. This is Mayor Niehaus. Can you hear me? Hi, Cassie. This is Mayor Niehaus. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Welcome virtually to our meeting tonight. Thank you for calling in. Oh, now I can see you. Fantastic.
I like this this method because I don't have to drive into town, and I can make dinner while I'm watching the meeting. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I did submit written comments, and I will let those stand. I am a mom whose daughter played city rec sports, and I would venture to say that city rec sports are kind of the heart of our community certain times a year and are well worth supporting. I also represent an arts organization who has been fortunate enough to receive funding from the city, the Moab Free Concert Series, which I think is a universally, well, I think, a beneficial event for our community. In addition to that, I just wanted to say that I think the wrap tax is a fabulous idea for this community, and it is not only going to benefit our city, but also our county members, and that instead of worrying about what might happen, let's imagine what can happen. In the next 10 years, we can build a legacy for arts and culture, for our parks, and for our rec department. And wouldn't that be something to look back on and be proud of? So while I do not live in the city and I cannot vote for this, I encourage everyone that is able to do so, because all of us will be paying that tax, not just the city residents. And I think that's something that has been reiterated tonight. And I thank you all for entertaining this idea, and I'm feeling hopeful moving forward.
Cassie, thank you so much for calling in and for your comments.
You're very welcome.
I guess zooming in. And Summer, do we have anyone else waiting for us in the wings? Anyone that has called in since we've been live?
I don't have anyone at this time.
Okay. Council, question. I am more than happy to pull up the comments that were submitted online, the written comments, and read them now if you'd like. Or we can just reference where the community can read those and leave it at that. What would you like? Ronnie?
Sorry, my mute's having issues. I guess personally, I wouldn't mind if you read them, because I think there were some things raised in them. Since we were saying at the end, we might be able to elucidate or clarify some points raised. That it's both nice for everybody to have everything packaged in terms of comments in this meeting so they can come to YouTube and hear it. But then it's nice for them to, if there are easy things we can respond to or clarify. So if everybody else is up for that.
Yeah, Mayor, I do think it would be a good idea to read the comments, particularly if they're not too terribly long, because it's more like, you know, the usual in-person process that we used to do, where people came in front of us and the whole public hears it. And it gives us a chance to react in some fashion. And I think people appreciate that feedback. So I'm all for it.
I've read them. None of them are too long. I'm supportive of that. If you want to read.
All right. I will just pull them up here. And I will just read them in the order that they are presented. And I'll be looking at the document. So if something funny is happening in Zoom land, will you just let me know? And I suppose that this also gives time, Summer, that if anyone does call in over the course of reading, that we can still accept comments from folks if they want to Zoom in.
And I'll let you know if anyone enters the waiting room.
Okay, so I will start with Evers. Jen Evers. Tourists take a great deal from this community and its resources. There should absolutely be a cost for that, and it should be paid for by those degrading it most. As a local, I think tourism is well out of hand and resent it much of the time. If the community's residents, not just business owners, benefited more directly from the onslaught of tourists, it would go a long way. Comment number 2, Holland. Liz Holland. It is important for us as a community to support our youth programming and city facilities. It's time to invest in our city facilities and parks that are due for some major upgrades. A lot of the playground equipment at Swanee Park is at least 30 years old. It has been there since I was a kid. Having upgrades to the ballpark, where we spend a lot of our summer nights, is something I would love to see, even if that means just having working lights on the ball fields. I enjoy having a gym to play co-ed volleyball, taking my kids to the swimming pool, attending community events, and all the amazing programs that Proposition 8 would support. Comment number 3, Sandra Holtgren. Please, no more taxes. Funds raised from yet another tax will benefit a very small number of Moab residents for things we will never use. There are so many recreational opportunities here already. Do we really need more? I don't think so, yet we all will be stuck paying for even more. No, thank you. Too many of us are already being priced out of living here. Public comment, Teresa King. Dear City Council, as you know, I am an advocate for the Recreation, Arts, and Park sales tax. Teresa King. I'm still unsure of the procedure to comment. Do I need to fill out a form to speak by phone or on Zoom or both? Let me know. Well, Teresa, you've done both. Public comment from Deb Kloss. I'm a property owner in Moab City and would like you to please consider approving the RAP tax. There is a great need for pickleball courts in Moab. It's the fastest growing sport in the USA right now and would greatly benefit Moab residents and would also help attract tourists in the winter months. Sarah Mead. I am commenting in favor of Proposition 8, otherwise known as the RAP tax. Although this is a financially difficult time for many residents in our community, I believe that tax such as this is a great implementation of smallest change for greatest good. I am also comforted knowing that nearly 80% of annual spending is from non-residents. So while locals and visitors alike will pay the tax equally, the programs that benefit from the tax will be more supported by the folks who enjoy our culture as a vacation simply because they are doing more buying. I think public parks, recreation programs, and especially the arts as an integral part of the community's culture. Moab as a place and a culture is more than extraction, both by tourist and oil and gas industries and development. And I see this tax as a gesture of acknowledgement of that fact, along with direct action to support it. Cassie Pop. I am writing in support of Prop 8 or the RAP tax. This type of tax has been successfully implemented in 34 cities and 7 counties in Utah alone. My organization, Friends of the Moab Folk Festival, is a recipient of city funds to support the popular and community building Moab Free Concert Series. As a parent whose child participated in city recreation softball, I believe this tax would be beneficial to the city and county residents. The burden of funding will be primarily on visitors. Culture, arts, and parks are some of my favorite things about this community. Let's keep them vital in these times of COVID budgetary shortfalls. Mark Thomas. I favor passing Prop 8, the RAP tax, provided the council establishes a RAP advisory board to oversee the guidelines and process for receiving funding applications. This advisory board should also be charged with making recommendations to the council on approving of RAP funding disbursements. With input from this board and the general public at council meetings, I feel this is an effective way to help fund the city's cultural and recreational amenities. Jennifer Wenzel. We live on Old City Park and run a B&B. We do not want any additional taxes being imposed or any current ones increased more than you have. Moab needs to start handling its budget and planning process better before asking for or carelessly spending funds. Now is not the time to make spending more expense for tourists if you'd like them to keep coming. More tax is not an incentive to help tourism. Plan and spend better and smarter. And there was a duplicate, but submitted comment, same comment, but in duplication. And that is it in terms of submitted comments online. Wasn't
We
too
did not
bad.
have anyone in the waiting room either.
Okay, well, I think at this point in our meeting, we can open up to final comments and questions that council has. Ronnie, would you like to start?
Sure. And I guess I just invite, Joel and Lori and Carly, if there's things you've heard tonight online or in the submitted comments that you think need some clarification or just maybe weigh in. Or do you want to do that first? Okay, I will proceed. I just had a few side questions written down. So sorry, my head keeps turning, but I'm looking at another computer screen. I think I've asked this before in a meeting, but I thought it's good to just revisit here because this tax is specifically for recreation, arts, parks, trails. So if somebody looked up the city budget today, for those departments, I didn't see anything in the RAP tax literature so far. And I think we've discussed this before, and I just need a reminder, maybe it's good for people listening. Like if one looks at the line item budgets, like under the MRAC or under the MARC or under recreation programs, it was my understanding that the RAP monies could be used for any of those line items. But just remind me, is there anything that falls under those departments that it can't be used for?
So we wouldn't use it to pay salaries or benefits. We would use it solely for programming. The way that would work is it would be similar to how Class C road funds work. They come into the budget, they then get categorized through a numeric system where those funds are held with a certain attachment, and then they're tracked by that attachment. And if Prop 8 was adopted, you would be able to pull up the city budget using that tracking number. You'd be able to see where all those funds were going.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful because I think some people maybe weren't entirely sure, if it could be used in part for salaries, and that's probably depending on where you lie in this, a pro or a con. And then I feel like when I read the comments, and I just don't know if staff has any insight for us or if my colleagues do, there's some people who are under the impression that we'll be getting a new pool of money and we can do all these new projects, and other people who are under the impression that, because we've been subsidizing, it'll just, help us pay for where things have been hard to pay for. So I know one will look at the budget every year and consider, and we'll have public meetings. And if we have a committee, everybody can weigh in. But I'm just wondering at the get-go now, as people are voting on it, is there anything they should know about, often in other communities, this has been used, initially the first few years, to get on your feet, and you don't usually use it for new things until after. I can imagine there's some people too who wonder, like, if we build something new, and we're already short on money, will we have time, paying for its maintenance? So I just didn't know if there's any insight on that.
Ultimately, that's a decision for council. Budgeting and the spending of funds is a legislative decision. It's not a staff decision. So the staff or the mayor as the executive does not have the determining factor is how this money is spent. Only the council can spend money. So that would be a question for the council, how they chose to use it. And annually, we're not allowed to do contracts much out more than a year. For the most part, there's some exceptions to that, but that's pretty standard for a rule. The decision on whether or not, if we're already subsidizing recreation, arts, and parks within the city at a tune of $1 million, the question of whether or not you use that to offset that $1 million subsidy, or whether or not to use that as new money to continue to subsidize at that rate and use the $300,000 to $400,000 to begin new programming or new benefit, is a question for you guys. And I think that has more to do with what your revenues look like in your general funds coming in than it does with the RAP tax itself.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that just helps some people understand like the thought process or the process that goes through and pros and cons of different directions and the reality of budgets. Let me just see if there's anything else. Let me see. Oh, so we had at least one question asking about this advisory board, and thanks for explaining that other communities have done that sort of thing. And does one see the gamut? Is the advisory board or committee, are they usually to specifically focusing on any community groups that might be applying for funds, or are they sometimes also somehow broader band giving advice on the RAP funds as a whole across the board?
Joel, can I comment on this?
Yeah.
Because I think what we're going to find is, as a council, that we're likely going to start off with the question, like you proposed in your last question. Are we going to supplement budget, or are we going to be creating sort of a grant opportunity or a fund that then can create new projects? And I think every year is going to be different, you know, whether or not we've got money or not. I think that in like 2 years ago, we might have said, hey, you guys, we've got this money. We want to see these beautiful projects come to fruition, but it's really hard to decide. At that point, I think a community board would be an amazing resource to us to help us sort of guide what projects the community wants to see. And I suspect the pickleballers would be pretty loud. But otherwise, I think if we decide as a council looking at our budget and say, hey, we've got a shortfall, then that might, you know, then I think having a board might be a moot point.
Okay,
And
no,
to
thanks for
further-
all that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And to further answer your question, the boards kind of come in all forms. That'd be a decision for the council as to whether or not they're just speaking to how it's done through a community contributions type program, or whether or not how they're being used within the funds. But ultimately, regardless of how it's set up and what their recommendation is, it's a question for council. They are a recommending board. And so the sole power of a legislative body is its spending authority. The power is their purse. And so that legally cannot be taken from you guys as a body. Even if we create that community council, they'd be kind of like a planning commission. They'd be advising as to how they think it should go forward, but ultimately the decision would still lie with this council.
Okay, cool. And I think the only other question I'd gotten that I just wanted to make sure I was clear of, and so I answered this person's question, the community groups that could potentially ask for funding, would they also have to fall under this RAP description? They would have to either be doing recreation or arts, cultural, or park stuff?
Yeah, the guidelines under the code lays out what you do, what you have to qualify. So it would be like a cultural organization, zoological organization, a botanical organization, and then we would, you know, use the code to determine whether or not groups qualify under those categories. And
Okay.
so if they don't qualify, then we're not allowed to give them money out of these funds. It doesn't mean we as a city in better revenue years couldn't create another community contributions like we were doing up until a year ago, where we were just using general funds to fund an organization regardless of whether or not they met those categories. So it doesn't mean those other groups that don't qualify couldn't ask the city under a different program for a grant. It just means they couldn't ask for a grant out of this account.
Great. Okay, thank you very much for that. And thank you for all of you guys have been working on this. That was really helpful.
Lori, did you have a comment, or were you just making sure your light wasn't falling asleep on you?
Yes, it went dark on me, so I was trying not to wave my arms too frantically, but yes, I had no comment. I just lost my lights.
Okay, Tani, did I see your hand?
Well, I just have a really quick comment. I think Ronnie asked all the questions that we all got in emails or just in conversation. I would just like to say that I would really support an advisory committee, even if we have years where we just have to say, you've got 3 things you can pick from because we don't have a lot of money this year. Give that advisory committee good direction, but I would like to see that just that input from the community. Sometimes we get too close to things, and I would really support that.
Thanks, Tani.
I would
And
second
there's-
that.
The process for something like that would be very simple. It would be similar to how we've set up the planning commission, or how we most recently set up the Arches Hotspot Funding Committee. We would draft up an ordinance creating the number of seats, how they're appointed, how they're approved, the terms, how they're staggered, all of that. And so if this council chose to create that committee, that's one resolution away from being done. That's not difficult at all.
All right. Does anyone else have any final comments that they want to make or questions that they have? Well, I think that concludes the business then for this evening. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Tawny.
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion passes unanimously and we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Get a good night's sleep and I'll see you in 2 weeks for probably a very long meeting.
Thank you guys
Thank
so much.
you.
Bye, everybody.